After 4 years, I finally decided to talk about what happened the day the bodies fell from the sky. Uden doshiv trupio, they call it in my town here in the Ukraine. That's a long time to keep a memory buried, to deny that such a horrible thing happened, even to yourself. To wake up nearly every day hoping for the sudden realization that it was all some kind of nightmare. But year after year, the images burned into my mind have only become more clear, more painfully vivid, as if the dead are begging me to tell their story. I can only hope that they'll have mercy on me, that they'll stop showing their ruined, rotting faces the second I close my eyes to sleep at night. So, here it goes. I remember the day the bodies rained from the sky. I'd been with my friends, hanging out behind the grocery store, smoking cigarettes Misha had stolen from his father, when an ear-shattering explosion echoed from above, more deafening than the loudest thunder, and rocked the town out of its Thursday afternoon routine. No one was sure what had happened at first. Confused glances were exchanged. Then there was a moment of tense silence, like time was frozen. Then they started falling, spinning in the air like rag dolls flung carelessly out of a window. There were sickening thuds, sharp cracks as bones broke. I remember watching in stunned silence as a man in a suit hit the roof of a nearby house and came apart into pieces, his round glasses flying up into the air. With the bodies came twisted pieces of ragged metal, suitcases, books, magazines, phones, laptops, all the things that they had carried with them, turned first into dangerous projectiles, before ending up as so much useless debris lying scattered across the blood-stained streets. I ran home with my head under my arms that day, sprinting out toward where we lived on the edge of town in total panic. I locked myself in my room and looked out my window at the field next to our small house, watching smoke rising from the tall grass toward the sky in thin, gray columns. I was terrified, transfixed, head swimming. Hours passed, and the sky darkened. I just kept staring, blankly, trying to process what I'd seen. I kept thinking of that man in the suit, and the glasses he'd never use again. Had he been alive when he hit the roof? Had I just seen him die? I was shaken out of my thoughts by the sound of the front door slamming, and I opened my own door a crack to look out. My father stood in the kitchen, camouflage jacket and pants stained with dirt, face smeared with sweat. He took off his dark green cap and threw it on the table, then stood staring down at it, brows furrowed, fists balled at his sides. I could feel the rage seething from him, smoldering like the wreckage out in the field. Suddenly, he grabbed the chair in front of him and smashed it against the wall as hard as he could. I cringed at the impact in the otherwise silent house. The back splintered into pieces and he stood there holding the leg, panting. Then he looked in my direction, and for a split second, we locked eyes. I'd never seen such anguish on my father's face, not even when my mother died. I panicked and shut the door. What happened? I wondered numbly as I sat on my bed, covers draped over me like a tent. Yesterday, my father had been so proud, marching with his friends in the streets, celebrating the capture of a new missile defense system with our neighbors cheering them on. Had they failed in their mission to protect us? Would we be overtaken by the enemy? I wondered if my father would come in and talk to me. Instead, I heard the opening of kitchen cabinets, the clinking of glass, and the slamming of the door to the other bedroom. The signs he would be drinking himself to unconsciousness. Eventually, I began to doze off, and for hours tossed and turned somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, covered from head to toe in cold sweat. Over and over again, I saw that man in the suit hitting the roof, watching his now unneeded glasses flying absurdly off of his face to break onto the streets below, seeing his arm separated from his shoulder and swinging grotesquely off the edge of the house. and then I watched as the scene changed, as his severed head rolled in front of my feet and the eyes opened. I jolted awake, breathing heavily, and glanced at the old digital alarm clock on my nightstand to see it read 2:20 a.m. I'd forgotten to close the blinds, and moonlight now filtered in through the window, casting my room in a complex array of shadows. Realizing I needed to use the bathroom, I began to pull myself out of bed and happened to glance out the window when I froze, breath caught in my throat, barely able to breathe. The full moon above bathed the field outside in a pale, ghostly light, illuminating the tall grass swaying in the wind, and scattered across the field, facing our little house, which felt so lonely now, I saw them silhouetted in the bone-white glow of the night. Dozens of them. They stood like scarecrows. Broken limbs hung from bloodied bodies at bizarre angles, their heads cocked unnaturally, their shredded clothes rustling gently in the breeze. Numb, panic-stricken, I tried to scream, but only a whimper escaped my constricted throat. Fumbling at the cord, I finally managed to pull down the blinds, plunging my room into darkness. Frantically, I jumped up and felt around the wall for the light switch. The seconds before my hands finally found it seemed like hours. And as soon as it was flipped, my room returned to normal. Bright, comforting, sheltered from whatever was outside. Outside. I looked at the closed blinds, trying to regain control of my breath. I had to have imagined that, right? I tried to reassure myself. It must have been a nightmare. So, if it was just a nightmare, I answered silently, there should be no problem with looking out in the field, should there? I won't see anything. I stared at the cord. It looked innocently back. I'm going to pull it, I thought. Okay. 3, 2, 1. I didn't move. The blinds remained closed. Exhaling sharply, I laid down and rolled to face away from the window. I didn't want to look at it. An image formed in my mind suddenly of what was behind the curtain. Empty eye sockets staring at nothing, closer now, biding time, waiting for me to fall asleep. I cut the thought short. I don't want to look at it or think about it, I told myself. It was a nightmare, and that's that. I pulled the covers over my head and stared at the underside of my blanket, able to still dimly see the light through the fabric. I imagined fluffy sheep with numbers on them jumping over a fence. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next thing I knew, I was disembodied, airborne, watching a group of men from above. Their brand new missile defense system was armed and ready, and they were tracking a target on their radar. My father was giving the orders. At that altitude, it could be a civilian aircraft, someone was saying.
It's the goddamn government rats, and they've disrespected our airspace for the last time,
he was saying.
Fire, or I'll shoot you.
Suddenly, I was waking up. It seemed like only a couple of moments had passed, but I knew it was longer from the ache in the arm I'd been laying on. It took me a second to realize that some sound had woken me up, and whatever it wasn't happening any longer. I strained my ears listening, but heard nothing. The silence was deafening. I took a deep breath. It was nothing. You were dreaming again. How many times... And then I heard it. The jiggling of a handle. The handle to my room. Breath caught in my throat, I watched helplessly as the knob began to turn. Finally, I managed to break my silence. No, I muttered. No sooner had the words left my mouth did the handle stop moving. I heard shuffling sounds, barely hushed footsteps hurrying through the kitchen, the closing of another door. Then the small house was once again as still and quiet as a tomb. For the rest of the night, I sat hunched under the covers, gripped in the total paralysis of absolute terror. Minutes turned to hours, and I only realized morning had come when my alarm clock began beeping to wake me for school. Finally, I pulled myself from the bed, stiff muscles protesting, and inched towards the door, sparing a glance to the blinds. Empty eye sockets staring, scorched flesh smoldering. I pushed it open with a creak and stopped dead. Hanging from the kitchen light fixture, my father's body swung gently back and forth, neck purple and black with bruising from the belt around it. Heart pounding, tears at the corner of my eyes, I caught sight of something on the ground below his boots. A pair of round, cracked eyeglasses, strikingly familiar. Glasses that my father did not wear.